Hey freaks, it's JJ. Welcome to my channel. Today is part 2 of how to write a concept album using Unleash the Archers as a prime example. So today we are talking about Unleash the Archers album Abyss, which is the continuation of the story from their previous album Apex. So I'm excited to talk about this today because it's such a fantastic album. It's really just a fantastic two albums. Like, I don't know if I could place one above the other because they're both really great. And the story that they tell is just almost flawless in my opinion. So let's talk about it. If you have not already watched my other video where I talk about Apex, then I suggest you go watch that now. I'll put that somewhere up here. And then, yeah, after this video too, I'll link a video where I actually was live talking about some of my favorite power metal bands. Anyway, make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already so you get notified when I put out other content such as this. And let's get started. So, like I stated in my other video, if you haven't watched Brittany Slay's videos where she goes track by track explaining the story concept behind these two albums, then I suggest you do that at some point now or after this video. I'll also link her videos down in the description too if you guys want to check it out. I suggest you kind of just get an overview of the storyline. I'll try and do my best to just briefly explaining it, but she goes more in depth and it's really worthwhile, I think, to watch those. And so, yeah, I'll be referencing some of the things she says, but I'm not going to go too far into detail. I'm going to mostly focus this video on talking more about just the craft of storytelling and how she incorporated that into music. So, the first track, Waking Dream, she's explained kind of, it's more like an interlude track. And so this is what you want to do if you're writing in a series. You always want to have some kind of recap. Basically at the beginning of the second sequel, because, you know, it may have been some time since your audience had last experienced the first installment of the story. So having some kind of recap is great. She does this through this kind of like interlude track, which, you know, reprises at the end and kind of really brings it into a really cohesive concept. So I love the way that this album kind of starts off really slow, and this is the immortal kind of waking up after 50 years have passed since the events of the last album. And then in track 2 we have Abyss, which is the immortal realizes he is on some kind of spaceship, and so he's not really sure what's going on. He's pretty confused, but he stares out the window at this, you know, vastness of space. And so this is kind of what I would like to look at as the inciting incident of this story. It's where it all begins. Is, you know, he's suddenly awakened after about 50 years, and he's in this weird, strange place that he's never experienced before. And this is him being a little bit afraid of what is going on and what he's seeing outside the window of the spaceship. But he's also kind of accepting that he's on some kind of new journey. And so this is him kind of crossing the threshold, so to speak. He's accepting this call to action. He's accepting that he's about to go on a journey instead of trying to fight it. So that's something that you want to signpost to your audience or your reader or your listener, whatever format you're telling your story in, is that, you know, this is where the character started, and now this is him crossing the threshold into a whole new world. This is him embarking on the journey. So in track 3, we have the immortal exploring this spaceship that he's on. And he seems like he's pretty much alone. He can't find anyone there, and this leads to him re-experiencing some of the feelings he had right before he went back into the Apex and had his most recent slumber. And so if you remember at the end of the previous album, he was in this headspace where he was kind of thinking that, you know, maybe he should try to be in charge of his own fate and not just accept everything that happens to him. And so at this point, he is kind of returning to those feelings. It's just kind of him picking up right where he left off, even though 50 years have passed. He's kind of been asleep for those 50 years, so not a whole lot of progress has been made on that front since he was not conscious. So this, in the scheme of storytelling, is where we have kind of like the statement of the theme. And you see this a lot in a lot of movies and a lot of books, where early on, you know, usually in the first 10% of a movie or a book, you'll have some sort of statement of the theme, of the thing that the character is going to learn while he is on this journey. The character needs to learn that he is in charge of his own fate. You know, he can't blame all the horrendous things that he does on someone else. You know, he has to take accountability for it, and he has to be in charge of trying to change it if that's what he wants to do. So this whole statement of this moral theme and this, you know, these feelings that keep haunting him throughout his time being alone on this spaceship kind of shows that kind of explores this idea that if he stays in stasis, you know, if he stays where he's at, it's going to lead to some sort of destruction or unhappiness, versus if he embraces change and tries to, you know, accept this form of like self-empowerment, it's going to lead to success. And so that's just kind of the moral theme kind of encapsulated in this track. And then in track 4, Legacy, we finally have the arrival of this mentor type character. We finally get some answers as to what's going on with the Immortal and why he is on the spaceship. So we meet this mentor character, which is the grandson of the matriarch from the previous album. And he basically has awakened the Immortal so that he can help him defeat the matriarch. And so this is, you know, this is the driving force of the plot. This is the goal of the plot, at least externally. So like I talked about in my last video, good storytelling is always going to have basically two plots. You're going to have an internal and an external plot. So the previous track we talked about the internal plot that's going to take place within the character. And this track we were talking about the external plot, like what is the journey that they're going to go on physically that's going to affect change within the character and, you know, in the physical world as well. So track 5, Return to Me. This is where we have the introduction of the big, main, scary villain character, and that is, of course, the matriarch, which is the same villain from the last album, but now she is immortal because she was able to achieve that ritual that took place in the previous album. So she realizes that the grandson has stolen the immortal from her, and so she's pretty pissed. And so she kind of vows to take vengeance on them. And so yeah, this is the introduction of the antagonist character, which the antagonist character is going to be symbolic in that she represents the character staying in stasis. So a lot of the times we have antagonist characters. You know, so a lot of the times there's multiple, and then there's usually like one main villain, but they all try to tempt the main character to not achieve his character arc. They tempt him to stay in that form of stasis where, you know, he feels safe and he just goes about doing what he's always done because it's what he's used to. So the immortal does throughout the story get tempted into self-doubt that, you know, maybe he can't do this or maybe he shouldn't, or it'd just be easier just to surrender to, you know, the powers that be. So the antagonist is going to, of course, have an effect on the external plot, which is trying to kill the grandson because she's pissed and she wants revenge, but she's also going to affect the internal story of the main character as well by tempting him to not achieve his character arc. Track 6, Soulbound. So in the previous album, we have the matriarch kill a bunch of her sons, and that is what helped her become immortal. And so we find out now that the souls of those sons that she killed have been bound to her as the servants of evil. They're like her little minions. So at first the immortal has to defeat these spellbound evil little souls that the matriarch has created. So this is basically kind of like the halfway point in the story, and this is where you're going to want to have some kind of rising of the stakes. So now, you know, it started off the immortal wanted to achieve this mission because he wanted to do, you know, the right thing for himself and, you know, and the grandson who is helping him out. But now he also wants to do the right thing and defeat the matriarch because you know, he feels bad for these trapped souls. And so that's kind of adding on another layer of reasons to achieve this goal. Now there's other people and other souls involved, and there's higher stakes if he doesn't achieve this. And so as soon as you start piling on more people who would benefit from you know, the success of the main character, you've then effectively kind of upped the stakes, and now there's more reasons why he needs to accomplish this mission. So then we go to track 7, Faster Than Light, and so after, you know, the immortal has defeated the spellbound and released their souls, the grandson and the immortal kind of flee from the matriarch in her wrath because she's pissed that, of course, her soul-bound minions have been defeated, and so now she's coming after them with all her strength. And this is kind of seen as like the moment of truth. So this is, like where the audience is going to be thinking, will the immortal kind of accept the change and his ability to be in charge of his own fate, or will he just run away? And so at the end of this track, we learn that he kind of stops and he decides, hey, I'm not going to run away anymore. I'm going to face this head on, and I'm going to gather my strength within myself and try to defeat this matriarch. So this is like another rung on the ladder for him accomplishing, this big change that we need to see within himself. We then go on to track 8, The Wind That Shapes the Land. So the immortal arrives on this kind of derelict planet where him and the matriarch have a last stand. One insane battle ensues between these two characters. So this is definitely the climax of the story. So the immortal has to use everything that he's learned from his journey in order to defeat his foe. So how does he go about defeating the matriarch, who is vastly more powerful than he is? He is patient and sees this flaw in her because he's on this journey as a character to become a better person. So now that he's kind of up here, when he started out down here, he's able to look down and see character flaws in other people, and so he's able to identify her character flaw, which is narcissism. And so he uses this against her, and he bides his time, waits until she lets him get closer and closer, and then he grabs her and strangles her and kills her. And so this is a great example of our character using what he learned throughout the journey in order to defeat the foe in the end. Because if this climax battle had happened right at the very beginning, he wouldn't have had the knowledge and the self-awareness to see his own flaws within himself, and he also probably wouldn't have been able to identify the flaws within other people as well if he didn't have this higher perspective from a higher moral ground. And so the climax is then resolved with, the immortal's victory. Yay, he defeated the matriarch once and for all. But he finds out that the grandson, his mentor, who's been this like father-like figure to him, is been injured in the struggle during this battle. So this is kind of sort of like a false victory. So we had the climax of the external plot, matriarch is dead, yay, we did that. But we still have to get to the climax of the internal plot, which kind of comes at the same time. And we have, this point where the main character, the immortal, has to decide what he's going to do next. This is the ultimate test of what he's learned so far with his character. And so we find out what his choice is in track number 9. So in track 9, Carry the Flame, the mortal is pretty upset that his mentor is basically on his deathbed, and he's speaking his last words. He's very injured. He knows he's going to die, and there's nothing he can do about it. And so the immortal feels like he's failed. He succeeded only to fail in the end, and in what really mattered. So he kind of starts to think, like, what was the point of this all? Did I even do the right thing throughout this whole thing? Like, he's a little bit lost at this point because he's losing a good friend of his, and the person who is guiding him through the correct moral course of action throughout this journey. And so the mentor tells him, to carry on being a good person, and with the grandson's last dying breath, he breaks the curse that the immortal is under, and the immortal is finally set free. So then we get to track 10, Afterlife, and this is where we really get to see what this character has learned throughout this whole journey, whether he learned his lesson or whether or not he's going to regress at the end. So, the mortal finally free, he kind of sets out to begin his own life for the first time. And he is tempted by, the idea in the back of his mind that he should, espouse evil, gain power, and, bring revenge on all the people who have wronged him throughout his life, or his past life, technically. But the part of him that was coached by the grandson knows not to listen to this voice. And so we leave off in a place where we believe that the immortal is going to set out on a journey to do the right thing. And here we have proof that the immortal learned something from this journey. He didn't regress into where he was at the beginning. He made some hard decisions and had to dig deep and really come out on top through making the right moral choices. So that's kind of my full story analysis of Unleash the Archer 2020 album, Abyss. I think the thing to take away from this is if you are planning on writing a concept album, I think it's important and would be worth your while to study a little bit of story structure and to study kind of just storytelling in general, because I think it will really have a bigger impact on your audience if your story has all these little things to tick off, all these punches that really hit your audience in a certain way. And it's kind of been boiled down to a very specific formula over the years. And I think if you kind of try to keep that in mind as you're writing a story or as you're writing your concept album, you're probably going to have like the most emotional effect on your audience. And I think this is, like I said, Brittany Slayes probably just kind of intoned all this, maybe just from reading some of the books, because I know she's very well read. It's also possible she studied story structure and storytelling as well when she was writing this. But it is one of the most, I would say, like cinematic concept albums that I've read and listened to, and it is also one that is very organized and feels much more like a fantasy epic. I mean, I know there's a lot of other concept albums, a lot of other just stories in general that are more of like a character study, and that's totally fine as well. And I'm not saying that that's any less effective. I'm just saying if you want to have like a big, epic, cinematic story that feels like you're getting a full movie or a full book inside your head as you're listening to it, then I suggest just, I don't know, exploring some of the things that screenwriters do and some things that authors do as well. Anyway, I love this album, and one of the things I forgot to mention at some point when I was talking about Unleashed Archers was how much I love the way that they incorporate death metal vocals alongside the power metal vocals is so perfect. Just if you want to like mesh like those two genres, I think that this is one of the better ways I've seen it done. And yeah, I just really appreciate when there's some death metal growls in power metal, and I feel like it's something you don't really see quite enough these days, and I think it's something that definitely sets them apart from a lot of other power metal bands, is their willingness to go a little bit on the heavier side. Sorry, that was a random tangent. If you guys want to support what I do here, please hit subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you want to get access to like a private playlist of bonus content, and if you want to suggest videos that you want me to do in the future, then please go down to the link in the description and sign up for my Metalhead community. From there, you'll get a bunch of bonus content and you'll be able to suggest videos. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, freaks. Until next time.